Good evening, I'm Klaudia Czerwińska and you're watching World News Tonight live from Warsaw. Volodymyr Zelenskyy issued a stark warning stating that Russia could open a new front in Europe, and as the interview continued, the lights went out. The outage, a result of an unprecedented attack on Ukrainian power plants, led to significant power cuts across the country. More on that in just a moment, but first, more top stories of today. Ukrainian security services conduct a major operation to investigate corruption in the energy sector. Trump has appointed a new envoy to Belarus to negotiate the release of political prisoners. And the Movember campaign promotes a proactive approach to men's health. In his latest interview, Ukraine's president issued a stark warning to the continent. Russia could open a second front in Europe before the war in Ukraine ends. At the same time, the Polish prime minister added a warning of Russia creating a fifth column in Europe, seeking to divide the continent. And while leaders reflect on the increasing threat from Russia, Ukraine remains cold and dark following the largest ever Russian attack on energy infrastructure. Our defense correspondent Zuzanna Jurek has the details.
We've seen some
What may seem like an attempt to sabotage Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy's interview
hard times
is now the daily reality for Ukrainians, forced to stumble through the dark as they try to go on with their day-to-day lives during record-long blackouts. Kyiv goes dark for 12 hours a day, while most of the country remains without power for as much as 16 hours. This comes as the Kremlin has ramped up attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure.
The enemy has again deliberately attacked energy infrastructure. Several large energy facilities have been damaged in Poltava, Kharkiv and Kyiv regions. One person was killed in the Kharkiv region. In the Poltava region, services are working to fully restore power to Kremenchuk and Horishny Plavny.
The Kremlin's continued attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure have now brought the country's electricity generating capacity to near zero.
They are really trying to weaponize winter, weaponize cold, weaponize darkness against Ukraine.
It is the way that Kremlin wants to put pressure on Ukrainian people, so, people would just go to government and say, we're surrendering.
To combat these, President Zelenskyy insists more anti-missile systems are of the utmost importance.
The Russians have increased their strikes, increased their striking power, and are using more ballistic strikes. This means we need more air defense, more equipment reserves, and more precise and prompt work in the regions.
On Monday morning, in fact, President Zelenskyy said he wants to order additional 25 Patriot batteries from the US, which may be a welcome move, but one of limited effectiveness.
Since about May or June of this year, the Patriot systems have become notably less effective. The percentage of intercepted ballistic missiles specifically has gone down quite dramatically. Russia has learned, right? I mean, after several years of this, they have learned to adapt and adjust the ballistic missiles in such a way that it makes them less easily able to be intercepted.
The ongoing assaults on his country have also prompted the Ukrainian president to issue a stark warning to the West during his interview with The Guardian.
I think it's not so much Europe is at war with Russia, but that Russia is at war with Ukraine and hypothetically with many in Europe.
And to that end, the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has also noted that strengthening Ukraine secures Europe.
We must focus on helping Ukraine, because if it lost the war, Poland's situation would change radically for the worse.
The Polish PM also noted that the Kremlin's agents working to divide and weaken Europe may be closer than we would have hoped.
The war that Putin has declared on the West is also taking place within our societies, and it is there that it is the fiercest. Putin has the tools to destroy the European Union as an organization, but also Europe as a cultural phenomenon. These tools include the Russian fifth columns, already present in every European country.
And just as Tusk warns the public of Russian dangers lurking within, Polish law enforcement is reporting a 41% rise in hate crimes against Ukrainians in the first half of 2025 compared to the previous year. For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
And now, time for a closer look at Ukraine's domestic struggle against corruption. A former business partner of President Volodymyr Zelenskyy fled Ukraine under the cover of night just hours before anti-corruption officers raided his home. All this came after a Monday statement by the Ukrainian anti-corruption services announcing a major operation to expose corruption in the energy sector. Let's now go live to Kyiv to our correspondent Oz Katerji. Good evening, Oz. So this raid, and possibly the ones that will follow, simply about fighting corruption, or is it about domestic politics as well?
Well, look, this is a very complicated issue. As you can see behind me, we are still being impacted by these power cuts here in Ukraine. So, and if you'll cast your mind back a few months ago, there were major protests. The first major protests of the war here in Ukraine broke out regarding the independence of this anti-corruption bureau currently involved in this investigation. So these are two issues that energy and this anti-corruption bureau are very important to the Ukrainian people. So this should definitely be understood as a very major issue here. Now, this regards a corruption scheme which the National Anti-Corruption Bureau alleges involves several high-ranking former officials, including one of President Zelensky's former business partners, Timur Mindich. And this is someone who hasn't been named specifically by the Anti-Corruption Bureau, but has been named by Ukrainian lawmakers in the aftermath of these raids. Now, a spokesperson for the detective at the National Anti-Corruption Bureau spoke about the potential people that are alleged to have been involved in this. Let's take a quick listen to part of his statement.
Among the currently identified members of the criminal organization are a former advisor to the Minister of Energy, the Executive Director for Physical Protection and Security of the joint stock company National Atomic Energy Generating Company Energoatom, a well-known businessman, and 4 individuals working in back offices.
So this scheme allegedly involved taking between 10 and 15% kickbacks or bribes regarding this state-owned energy company, Energoatom, here in Ukraine. So a major issue, certainly something that's going to be causing a headache for the Ukrainian government. But this anti-corruption process is something that has been going on in the background before the war began and while the war has been ongoing. It's not just important to Ukraine, but it's also fundamentally important to the EU and how they see Ukraine's future. If Ukraine is to join the EU, it will have to be after having gone a process of anti-corruption measures that the EU finds satisfactory. So this is all part of that. I think it does cause a particular headache for Zelenskyy at this current time, particularly with the energy crisis going on. But certainly the work of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau carries on, and we will continue to bring you updates on this case right here on TVP World.
Thank you, Oz. Stay safe and stay warm. That was Oz Katerji reporting live from Kyiv. And now we return to the topic of hybrid attacks taking place on the daily here in Europe, this time in Belgium. On Sunday, 3 drones were spotted over a critical nuclear power plant near Antwerp. Recently, drones have disrupted airport operations in Brussels and Liege alike. And for more, we now go live to our Brussels correspondent, Alex Cadier. Good evening, Alex. So what did the authorities say about this incursion? And was there any tangible threat to the nuclear power plant?
Well, good evening, Claudia. No threat to the operations of the nuclear power plant. That's according to ENGIE, the energy operator who operates this plant. They had confirmed that 3 or 5 drones were spotted over that plant, but saying that there was no threat to the operations of the nuclear facility. A little bit further afield, Liège Airport, which had been targeted in previous weeks, was also shut down for just around an hour. That is a key cargo airport for this relatively small country. We heard from Belgium's defense minister, who's been front and center, Theo Franken, about this particular incident. He offered some reassurance.
It's not as if the drones are armed, so it's not as if they're going to bomb a nuclear power plant or anything like that. But it's not inconceivable that the target will always be energy, infrastructure, churches, Ukraine. Energy infrastructure is a key target with an important primary objective. It will be no different in this case.
So clearly that Theo Franken offering some reassurance, but also highlighting the potential threat to the energy infrastructure in this country, just like we've seen the energy infrastructure in Ukraine being hit as well, Claudia. So that will be a cause for concern. The Emergency Crisis Center in Belgium says it was aware of these drone sightings. It had a national emergency council meeting in last week about those incursions over military bases. That very serious incursion which shut down Brussels airport for several hours, forcing hundreds of people to sleep in the airport. They say the situation is under control. But a bit of a question mark on that, because France, Germany and the UK have all committed to sending anti-drone technology and the personnel to help the Belgian authorities deal with these incursions, deal with this threat. Of course, the security of Belgian skies is not just about Belgium. NATO headquartered here, the European Union headquartered here. That will be a cause for concern, not just in Belgium, but across Europe. For now, the situation seems under control, but will be being monitored very closely indeed, Claudia.
Thank you, Alex. This was Alex Kadir reporting live from Brussels. He has already managed to negotiate the release of 100 hostages, says Donald Trump about his new special envoy to Belarus. Attorney John Cole is now tasked with securing the release of another 50 people, and judging by his previous track record, hopes are running high. During the last round of negotiations conducted by Cole in September, the Lukashenko regime released 52 prisoners, including 3 Poles and Belarusian employees of Belsat TV. In exchange, the U.S. lifted some sanctions previously imposed on the country. Anastasia Yanchenko has the story.
Trump called him one of the greatest lawyers in the U.S. on Truth Social, where he also announced the appointment of John Cole as special envoy to Belarus.
He has already successfully negotiated the release of 100 hostages and is going for an additional 50.
Exiled Belarusian opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya called Cole's appointment a fairly good sign.
Belarus and our political prisoners remain in the focus of the United States. Together with John Cole and his team, we have been working for several months to bring our people home and to stop the repression. And now we are waiting for new releases.
Cole had already informally acted as the U.S. president's envoy for Belarus. As part of the latest talks in September, Lukashenko released 52 prisoners, including 3 Poles and several Belarusian employees of Warsaw-based Belsat TV station.
The appointment of this important U.S. official is, in a sense, a significant step that brings the Belarusian issue back into focus in Washington.
For his cooperation with the U.S. on the issue of political prisoners, Lukashenko has already secured the lifting of sanctions on the Belarusian state airline Belavia and Lukashenko family aircraft, while over 100 major Belarusian companies and banks remain sanctioned.
These are all serious levers of pressure on the Lukashenko regime that could help bring about changes in domestic policy, above all the release of political prisoners.
But Lukashenko's regime hasn't stopped jailing people. The number of political prisoners keeps rising. Since this September, over 150 Belarusians have been arrested.
The balance is not in our favor. Lukashenko continues to imprison more people than he releases.
Earlier in September, U.S. President Donald Trump said he was hoping for a major deal that could lead to the release of 1,500 political prisoners in the near future. On Monday, Lukashenko announced that a U.S. delegation is expected in Minsk soon. Anastasia Yanchenko, TVP World.
Staying on the U.S., this is an unprecedented situation in the country's history. The government is going through a major shutdown as Democrats and Republicans were unable to reach an agreement on the budget. As it turns out, it's not just Americans who are suffering the consequences. Due to the paralysis of American government institutions, disruptions have occurred in arms deliveries to allied countries, including Poland. Maciej Wilowski has more in his latest report.
The U.S. government shutdown has put shipments of critical weapon systems to NATO allies and Ukraine on hold. Under U.S. law, Congress, with the help of federal staffers, is required to review and approve international shipments of weapons before they are exported.
Need State Department staff to process them. You have to have export documentation for them to leave the country.
Those staffers are among the roughly 700,000 federal workers who have been furloughed or put on leave as a result of the shutdown.
The State Department Bureau that oversees the briefing of Congress to approve those licensing documents is only at about 25% of its standard capacity. 3/4 of the staff were effectively furloughed.
Shipments of HIMARS missile launchers, AMRAAM air-to-air missiles, and other weapons to NATO allies such as Denmark, Croatia, and Poland have been affected. A sizable share of the equipment bound for NATO members is eventually transferred to Ukraine. While the impact on the battlefield has been minimal so far, a prolonged shutdown could affect Ukraine's ability to defend itself.
At this point, it's inconvenient. It becomes serious only if this becomes a prolonged delay.
Back in the U.S., the government shutdown, already the longest on record, is increasingly disrupting daily life, with air travel especially affected. On Sunday, travelers across the U.S. experienced the most hectic day of air travel yet, with more than 10,000 flight delays and nearly 3,000 cancellations.
Well, I almost canceled my trip because I was like, I don't even know what's going to happen. And then I just decided, all right, we're just going to go for it and see what happens. But yeah, it's just all unexpected. I'm just sick of it. It's like, what about us?
It was the third day of government-mandated flight cuts meant to address absenteeism among air traffic controllers who are among the government employees forced to work without pay. And with the busy holiday season fast approaching, those delays could get worse if the shutdown isn't resolved soon. From delayed military shipments to flight cancellations, the U.S. government shutdown is wreaking more havoc the longer it drags on. Maciej Wilowski for TVP World.
Dozens of people have been injured in a train crash in Slovakia just outside the country's capital, Bratislava. Two trains collided head-on after one of them reportedly ignored a red light while running at over 100 kilometers per hour. But this is not the first such accident taking place in the country, and questions are now being raised about the safety of the country's rail system. Our correspondent in Slovakia, Andrew Sweeney, has the details.
79 people were taken to hospital after two trains collided head-on in a small town just outside of Bratislava late on Sunday evening.
Around 800 people were travelling on the trains when they crashed. Witnesses described a big bang as they hit, with passengers being thrown into the seats around them. 3 of the injured passengers required surgery on arrival at hospital. They have since been described as being in a serious but stable condition. The cause of the crash has not yet been determined. However, according to Slovak Railways General Director Ivan Bednarik, one of the trains likely ran a red light.
The train obviously ran a red light and left the stop where it shouldn't have been, and the second express train hit it from behind at an estimated speed of over 100 kilometers per hour.
This is the second time in a month a serious rail collision has occurred in Slovakia. On October 13th, two trains collided in Jablonov na Turno, located near the country's second largest Košice. Up to 80 people were injured in the collision. Human error was blamed as the cause, with one government official saying that one of the train drivers had failed to yield to the other. According to a European Commission published in 2023, Slovakia has the second worst rail safety record in the EU after Greece, with 10.2 deaths per 1,000 kilometres of rail track. Slovakia's Prime Minister, Robert Fico, has called for the entire board of Slovak Railways management to be dismissed. The investigation into the incident remains ongoing.
For TVP World, Andrew Sweeney.
Every November, the mustache turns into more than just a fashion statement. It becomes a sign of unity among men who spread the word on prostate cancer prevention. Movember is the time of the year where conversations about men's health take center stage. After all, the prevention is better than the cure. Now, more than ever, spreading awareness of potential risks is critical as an increasing number of young men find themselves suffering from the disease. More on the significance of Movember in Aisha Abad's report.
Have you heard of Movember? Mustache November?
Each guy that's growing a moustache is a walking, talking billboard for Movember and men's health.
The movement began in 2003 in Australia, and since then, millions have joined in by growing a mighty mustache every November to raise funds and awareness for men's health issues, predominantly prostate cancer.
November is Prostate and Testicular Cancer Awareness Month. The testing takes only a couple of minutes, but it can save lives.
Most importantly, the goal is to encourage men from an early age to get annual prostate checkups. A recent study revealed that men that skip prostate screenings face a 45% higher risk of death from the disease.
The Movember campaign, When You Grow a Moustache, that I don't have at the moment, shows just how important it is to get tested and detected and gives us a chance for more effective treatment.
Prostate cancer is now the most common cancer among men in 112 countries, and its prevalence is expected to double by 2040. The office of the former U.S. President Joe Biden even announced he had been diagnosed with the condition last May. In Poland, an average of 48 men receive a prostate cancer diagnosis each day.
I just wear my mole as a constant reminder to all the men that they have to beware of their health issues.
I think this is very important for any man. It is important for everyone to do regular health checkups. I know well that men are not exactly eager to see doctors, so I believe the Movember movement is crucial.
An even more worrying fact is that across the EU, deaths from prostate cancer dropped by 7%, but Poland stands out as the only country where mortality increased by 18% between 2015 and 2020, prompting regional governments like the one in Gdynia to organize free preventative screenings.
There is such low social awareness of the need to get checked. Men put everything off until the last minute, and they'd rather not get checked at all. It's important, however, to root this necessity in people's minds.
So next time you see a mustached man in November, take it as a reminder. Get checked, start a conversation, or give a call to one of the important men in your life. Early detection can make all the difference. For TVP World, this is Aisha Badja.
And now back to one of our top stories of today, the nomination of John Cole as the U.S. Special Envoy to Belarus with the aim of securing the release of additional political prisoners held by the regime of Alexander Lukashenko. But everything comes at a price, and so to discuss how this appointment will affect the U.S.-Belarus dynamics and the possible outcomes, I'm joined by my tonight's guest, Franek Wieczorka, Chief Advisor to Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya. Good evening, and thank you for joining me on the program.
Good evening. Good evening.
So as we're looking at John Cole, who currently, now former Deputy Special Envoy to Ukraine and former personal lawyer to Donald Trump, he assisted already in September a release of a number of prisoners. Why do you think that President Trump actually made that decision to have that special envoy? Is this a sign of a relationship between Washington and Minsk getting better? What are we to expect from this apart from the exchange of prisoners?
So it shows primarily that Belarus remains on the agenda of President Donald Trump. John Cole is working on Belarusian political prisoners since February. We were advocating for a long time to have the special appointee for Belarus. After 2021, when Julie Davis was ambassador and special envoy for Belarus, we didn't have anyone. And right now there will be John Cole. And we worked with him thoroughly in last months to make sure people are being released. He works purely on humanitarian track. His goal is to negotiate with Lukashenko, and Lukashenko is a very tough negotiator. And I'm sure that John Cole will manage to release many political prisoners, including Andrzej Poczobut, Polish Belarusian journalist. So this is the goal. We are happy with this appointment, and we are wishing him best luck.
So would you say that this appointment of this particular person when it comes to that very important cause is actually putting Belarus in Washington's orbit, in Washington's spotlight yet again?
Indeed, absolutely, because there are no many envoys by Donald Trump right now. There is one on Ukraine, Kellogg. There is Vitkov, who is working on Russian-Ukrainian negotiation. There is an envoy on the Middle East, who is working on the Israel-Gaza conflict. Now there will be one on Belarus, which means that Donald Trump will put his personal attention to Belarus. and which means that there will be special policy on Belarus. It must not mean there will be like softening of relationship with Belarus. It doesn't mean that there will be back business to as usual with Lukashenko, but hopefully there will be more releases of political prisoners. So this is our expectation from this nomination, and this is what John Cole a few months ago told Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya personally, that he is working on saving people's lives, and we fully support it.
So also, when we look at this appointment, do you think it's more about having an independent line of contact with Lukashenko's regime in Minsk, or is it also about establishing a better communication and opening a new front when it comes to communications with Vladimir Putin?
There is such version that Lukashenko might serve as the communicator, postman to Putin, but I doubt this theory because Americans, they have enough contacts, enough lines of communication with Moscow, and it seems there are no much progresses in peace deal, in negotiations with Russia itself. So I don't think John Cole will be working on Russia. I think his focus will be purely Belarusian, how to release people, how to stop repression, how to bring democratic changes in Belarus, because release of political prisoners is just the first step. And the very fact that there is one person dedicated by President Trump to work on Belarus helps us, democratic forces of Belarus, to deliver our messages to Washington. And I hope that we will manage to convince Donald Trump to work closely on Belarus and to bring systemic changes in Belarus, not just to release people, but to bring Belarus to free and fair elections. That was our demand in 2020. It remains the demand of Belarusian people.
Obviously, the cause of Belarus, the situation currently taking place in Belarus is incredibly important to us here in Poland. We've covered the subject extensively, and actually one of my friends, Diana Skaya, had a lovely opportunity to speak to Sergei and Svetlana right after his release. What role do you think that Poland is going to play in that exchange between Minsk and Washington, as Poland clearly has its own skin in the game?
Poland will play a key role, and I'm sure that Washington will consult with Poland on basically every move regarding Belarus, because Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Ukraine, of course, are direct neighbors of Belarus, and they face the biggest threats from Lukashenko's regime. And regarding sanctions, regarding releasing people, regarding hybrid threats coming from Minsk and Moscow, I'm sure that Washington will be consulting with Poland. And let's not forget, there are many Polish citizens in Belarusian prisons, many hostages taken by Lukashenko's regime, including Andrzej Poczobut, including clergy, including priests, and Americans can help to release them. And I must commend Prime Minister Tusk and Minister Sikorsky, who are always keeping high on American and international agenda as well, the topic of Belarusian and Polish political prisoners taken by Lukashenko's regime.
Obviously, when it comes to the exchange or return of the prisoners, there's always a price tag on it. What do you think is going to be the price that the U.S. will have to pay for having another 50 prisoners being released from the regime?
It's a good question. I would separate, the question of sanctions and question of releasing political prisoners. Of course, it should be one step made by Minsk regime and one step towards regime, as it usually happens during the negotiations and during exchanges. But I think the most important is pressure. If we want to convince and force Lukashenko to release people, we must put maximum pressure, maximum sanctions. Without pressure and sanctions, Lukashenko will release no one from prisons. Americans, they just negotiate. If you, Lukashenko, don't want new sanctions, or if you want these sanctions relaxed, you have to release this number of people, these journalists, these activists from your jails. So I think the discussion about sanctions will be key here, and it's very important to distinguish two types of sanctions. There are sanctions imposed for the war, and they cannot be relaxed because the war is continuing, and Lukashenko helps Russia in this war. And there are sanctions imposed for human rights violations. And these sanctions potentially can be softened in case if people are released and repression stop.
Franek, just one more question before we go really quickly, as our time is coming to an end. Do you think we're going to see Andrzej Poczobut walk free anytime soon?
I think it's possible, and we have to work together to fight together for his release, because he is our common hero.
Thank you very much. Franek Wieczorka, Chief Advisor to Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, was my guest. Thank you for joining me on the program.
Thank you.
And so this would be all for now here on World News Tonight. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you back here on TVP World for more in just a moment.